All right. So here's episode number 2 with Justin. Welcome back. How are you?
Doing good. Doing good. Excited to do it again.
Yeah. So the first episode we talked a lot about the blockchain technology, what your thoughts are about it, and then your day job. Um, Obviously financial success, it's safe to assume that financial success is not something that has eluded you. So then how do you kind of find that balance between just like the top goal in life, right? So being just happy and then combining that with generating just enough money to have that balance and not get on the hedonic treadmill, so to say.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I don't know where it began, but I definitely remember at some point in my youth being amazed at how people like the difference between I grew up like upper lower class. I wasn't poor, but I certainly wasn't in the middle class. And I had a lot of middle class friends through my soccer team. And what was crazy is what mainly separated us was their family had two cars instead of one, or a
Mm,
TV in every room of their house. And it quickly realized I was like, wait, my richer friends want to come over to my house because I have video game systems and they didn't have those things, or that maybe that was a good parenting choice, but they didn't have those things. And I was like, so okay, clearly that's not what like makes happiness, and these parents still have the same fights and same arguments. So anyways, I think at some level I was influenced by my friends' parents growing up, that like I didn't really care about a middle class lifestyle in the United States. It wasn't interesting to me. I never had this collector mindset. And every time I collected things, because I did try it, like I had Pokemon cards, which I mentioned in my last podcast, our last podcast that we did, and none of that stuff like made me that happy. It was just fun to collect it initially, but then I didn't really care to store it somewhere. Um, so from an early age, that was sort of my mindset. And then as I started to travel more and started to go around places, I always realized like the memories that I took with me were memories where I was doing something active or I was doing something with other people. It wasn't like, remember that couch I bought in 2012? That was awesome. Like I never remembered that stuff. So I just like didn't care about it.
yeah.
And I think just over time, I've learned to just adjust my life to like those things. And you just have to be careful too, because I remember at my first job, I made like 35K. And every week I could have said I wanted more money. And then every time I got more money, I always needed more money, even though I was kind of content with the amount
Mm,
of money that I made, regardless of how much I was making. So there's
yeah.
like definitely a minimum you want to make. And I thought it'd be more important to figure out like what's the minimum I need to make to be happy, and then like what's the ideal. And I didn't come up with like perfect numbers, but I came up with a slight range, and that was my target.
Uh,
Um, and I tried to overshoot my target and actually make more money, because then I figured I could then really do things I cared about doing.
is it always about like a set target range, like about a set target, like this X amount of money, or is it more about like a lifestyle choice? Like if I could afford to do that, then I know that I am going to be happy. So is it about the amount, or is it about like a particular choice that you
Well,
have at the back of your mind?
for me, the amount was just a minimum amount that I know I can go back to and be happy. Not
Mm,
necessarily the amount I want to make, but the amount that I need to keep in my mind that if I try to make $1 million and I fail and I make 100,000, that's amazing because my minimum is 35,000. Like I don't require a lot to be. So for me, it's just like a mindset shift where no matter what you do, I think you're always going to want to make more, and you're always going to feel like no matter how much you make, you always think that that if you made a little bit more, you'd be happy. So for me, it was more important just to remember that I've learned how to be happy with way less money.
mhm.
So it's okay to want to make more money, but just as a mindset check, that minimum is all I need. So I can kind of recenter myself when I have a lot of anxiety about my cash situation.
Mhm.
Like for example, I got fired from my first job and
Mm,
I was about to quit. And I remember doing the math. I was like, okay, if I quit on this date, I can go 3 months without 3 months without needing to make any money, and I
mhm.
can afford rent. After that 3 months, I got to book a plane ticket home or figure out something, because I was in Hawaii at the time and I was pretty
Yeah.
broke. And I was panicking so much. And I'll never forget, within that first month, I found a couple side jobs, and I had made more money in that month than I had made in the prior 3 months
Mm.
of with my job. So I was like, oh my God, there's so much money out there. You really just have to look and recenter yourself that like there's opportunity. And even if everything goes bad, I always know I can go back to living a cheap lifestyle, and I know the things in that lifestyle that'll make me happy.
Yeah.
Just simple things, cup of coffee, going for walks, these types of things.
What I'm hearing from you is that it's not so much a matter of frugality, but it's more of a matter of finding contentment and peace
Yeah,
within.
that's I think huge. Is like how do you, if you had no money, how would you make the best of that situation?
Mm.
And that has helped me a lot growing up. That growing up in a world where I didn't have a lot of money, that's helped me sort of shift in here. And honestly, like listening to a podcast and going for a 2 hour walk is some of like the most enjoyable moments out of my day or out of my months.
Yeah.
So and that's free essentially.
Right, right. Did you see any change between mainland US and Puerto Rico? in the work-life balance, or going after a certain target amount of money?
Yeah, a huge difference, and
Really?
big differences between the United States and Hawaii. Hawaii is obviously a state, but big differences there, and then even a larger difference between the mainland and then Puerto Rico, which is a U.S. territory for anyone who doesn't know that. So in Hawaii and Puerto Rico, everybody prioritizes the outdoors a little bit more. They'd
Hmm.
rather go to the beach on a Friday afternoon and drink a beer than stay in the office till 5. And like, I think you'd be crazy if you didn't want to do those things. So that's really great. And then in Puerto Rico, there's like this, I don't know, I feel like when I got to Puerto Rico, I met a lot of people who were like just doing their jobs to make ends meet because
Hmm.
they really didn't like they didn't want to be the world's best accountant. They were
Hmm.
just an accountant, or they were just a lawyer, or they were just whatever,
Yeah,
because that's what pays the bills and then gets them the money to go out with their friends and enjoy life. So it's a different mind shift, a mindset change, but that's what I learned in Puerto Rico.
that's such an important thing, not to be so identified with that one thing that you do. Although
Yeah.
you do it for the most part of your day, but then again, there's so many different facets to ourselves that we kind of either fail to acknowledge or choose to ignore.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think we put our own work ethic onto other people in this in the
uh-huh.
States, where it's like I work all the time, so I expect anyone that I deal with to also prioritize their job
Yeah,
and work above all else. And it's like it's just the rest of the world doesn't, I think, I shouldn't say the rest of the world, but there are parts of the world that
yeah,
don't agree with that life philosophy at all. And it can piss you off when you want a bagel and the bagel shop isn't open because they just decided to take that day off. But if I was that bagel shop owner, I would also do the same thing. So I have a lot of empathy for people here.
right. Which actually happened to me. I saw on Google that there was this vegetarian place open on Ashford Avenue in San Juan. Um, and then when we reached there, it was closed.
Yeah.
And this was like 5 p.m. on a weekend. So it
Yeah.
should have been open, but it was closed. And people are like, yeah, that's pretty normal.
Yeah, that's it. You just got to get used to the Google Maps listings never being totally correct.
Right.
And part of it is just like, all right, great. I'm gonna have to think of 3 places I might want to go to today, or just
Yeah.
learn to go with the flow a little bit more.
Yeah. So that mindset change, that mindset shift, were there any accompanying rituals that went prior to that mindset change? Uh,
Um, Not so much rituals, but I think
or habits?
yeah, we're somehow finding a way to have like a center, like finding a way to center yourself,
Hmm.
and that can come in a variety of things. I was very fortunate that I had a minor in philosophy in college,
Hmm.
and I'm certainly not an expert in anything philosophy, but one thing I do like about even amateur philosophy is that you find out that like all the same anxieties and problems you have are the same anxieties and problems that every generation going back to like Egypt or
Yeah.
written language has had.
Yeah.
And it's very nice to read somebody who lives a completely different world from like the technologically space. Like Alan Watts is a great example of, he's dead
Yeah.
now, but have you heard of Alan Watts? Have you read his
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah. I haven't read his stuff. I've seen some of the videos, some of his like the meditation videos. Is that the same?
Yeah, I think he has a lot on
Yeah.
Buddhism and meditation. I
Yeah.
read his stuff on insecurity and just,
Okay.
anyways, anxiety of life. And for me, his mind, and he's also has a beautiful voice. So if you can really,
Hmm.
that just works for me when I channel his energy to, it just like recenters myself that every person like ever in existence has had the same issues of wanting to always have more. So
Hmm.
to be able to just kind of like bring it back to those mantras, quotes, books, whatever your media enter. I'm sure there's TikTok and
Hmm.
influencers now who do this, but for me, it was always like the centering in some of the philosophy that I got taught.
Do you find that you put into practice some of those philosophies when you're doing those physically intense activities like rock climbing, and not so much on a thinking level, but subconsciously you just become calmer because you're intensely focused on this one activity? What is your mind space at that time?
Yeah, being calm is hard. I've not mastered this, and it's
Okay.
I like these kind of hobbies because they bring out, like, if you're someone who's indecisive, it'll come out in sports, especially sports like rock climbing where you'll
Yeah.
just freeze on the wall. And right now I'm really into spearfishing, which I never thought I'd be into. And part of
Tell
it
us
is
more
like,
about that. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like a game. You go out, there's a bunch of different things to find. It's kind of like, I like to describe it too, is even if you're not spearfishing, when you're snorkeling in really cool terrain and diving in cool terrain, it's almost like you're hiking from the sky, like you're kind of just cruising through and seeing this underground mountain, and it has all these different ridges. So it's really pretty, especially when you get away from the spots that most snorkelers would go.
Uh-huh.
Um, so it's been just a really fun game of like the biggest part of me is that I've always struggled to like I have trouble getting past 40 feet deep. And I think the average person is like, whoa, 40 feet deep is crazy. But
Hmm.
I have friends who on their first 3 days of a freediving course have gotten to 60 to 80 feet deep. So I
Wow.
have really struggled to hit that intermediate to advanced level in freediving. And you certainly don't need to do that spearfishing, but it's all part of, to me, the progression and getting like it's really fun to become experienced and like very competent at something. Trying to become a professional is kind of where it gets boring to me, but
Hmm.
getting really good at something is super fun, and it just has me hooked. There's so many elements. There's teamwork involved with you and your partner. There's the unknown. There's the exploration, and there's just all these things that just makes it a really good time. And you don't come out of the water sweating. You know, I love that part. You feel clean afterwards, and you just feel like you had a really good day. But I also answer your question with the mind shift or the mindset
Yeah.
stuff. I'm still working through that, but I know at least in rock climbing, it was crazy when I watched a video of myself climbing and I saw how fast I was going. But when I was on the wall, I felt like I was going slow. And
Mm.
I just, when I'm on a hard rock climb, I try to dial it back and like whatever speed I think I'm going, I try to
Hmm.
reduce that by 25 to 50% because I know that in my head I'm going much much faster than I think I am. So I just need to bring it down a little bit, catch my breath, and give a chance to catch up, which is probably a good philosophy for my life too. Sometimes it's nice just to step away from my computer,
Yeah.
take a notebook out when my mind is racing, write down
Hmm.
all of these scattered thoughts, and then just try to make some sense out of some of the thoughts of what maybe my focus should be for that day. It's
Yeah.
not a perfect system, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of learning every month on it.
Personal question, feel free to decline. Do you meditate in some form?
Um, I've tried like traditional meditation with like cross legs and that kind of stuff, and my brain is a little bit too ADHD for that. But I absolutely do. I My meditation is probably a little bit different. I really like to think about like the universe. I really like to think about the stars. I really like to think about how the world, like with my very amateur level background in physics, really try to grapple with some of these larger questions from like a physics standpoint, and that takes me into really cool headspaces where um, and I can go, I'm actually diving deep into one right now, like an actual research project. But to answer the question, I can come back to that in a second. I figure
Yeah.
I speak up. I like to just really, that brings me back to a certain place and it gives me a lot of peace to think about just like how wild it is that I'm even, whatever life is, that I'm even alive. And that for some reason centers me. I think 10 years ago, that gave me anxiety and now
Hmm.
gives me a lot of inner peace. So that's been
Mm.
a big change.
Yeah. Before we come back to that thing, so one thing that I really enjoy, one of my favorite memories from Puerto Rico is just literally just sitting on Ashford Avenue and looking at the beach.
Mm.
It's not even like great for surfing, but just sitting there and just watching the waves wash over some of the rocks. I found that very, I wouldn't say meditative is the right word. I would say very, I just became very introspective at that point.
Yeah.
That's one of my takeaways from that.
That's probably a better way to say it is the introspective part. I know that feeling like you're sitting there and all of a sudden, like, I don't know, it's like the world kind of cuts away and
Yeah,
it's just you in the ocean. And I've never really tried to put it to words, but you kind of know it when you feel it. You're really content with life and it puts you in a headspace that you're probably not in 99% of your day. And I think the mountains, for some people, the mountains does that.
hmm,
Um, Everyone has their own little flavor of this, but I know exactly what you mean. When I go snorkeling and diving, that's another sort of aspect is sometimes I just kind of float there and I'm watching all of this underwater world happen before my eyes. And I'm like, this is an alien world down here. And
yeah,
I've never even thought about it. It just brings me a lot
surreal.
of peace. Yeah, it really is.
Do you find that kind of, I think I know the answer to this one, that yes, it recharges you, but then also does it rewire you in certain ways to come back to the real world, and then go about your business?
It certainly can if you let it. I think you definitely have to be like if you want to go out into nature and be aggressive and not let it teach you things, then absolutely. Like when I see my rock climbing friends get into rock climbing, a lot of
Yeah,
like newcomers always try to focus on like buying new gear or
yeah,
taking classes, and it's like you just need to go out and climb more. And if you're
right.
failing, you just have to be honest of why you're failing. Are you too weak? Are you scared? Are you,
Hmm.
just you really just have to be honest with yourself.
True.
And I think for me like that, it when I go out, I try to just, let nature give me some good lessons, and then I can come back and kind of take those lessons into the real
Yeah,
world. And like a practical example of this is, if you go out and you're in a tense situation and you made a mistake that put someone else's life in danger, you just have to own up to it, apologize, and make sure it never happens again. And I think taking that back into my real life has been, I've been in some pretty sketchy rock climbing situations in my life. And when the best situations are when both partners recognize the problem and just kind of punt the blame till the end of the conversation, and they just
Yeah.
try to work through the problem in that moment. And then at the end of the day, it's like, okay, this was my fault. And then someone has to kind of step up and say, hey, this was my fault, or this was both of our faults.
Mm.
How does this never happen again? And
Yeah.
that stuff's really real. And then when you come back into the office, you're like, 99% of these problems are really not that big a deal. We can just talk through this and solve them.
Right, right, right. You have an example of the rock climbing thing? Where
Yeah, I have a lot of, I think I have less than 5 near-death experiences, but
what?
my rock climbing incidents are not that, they're honestly just very silly mistakes. And the one I was in Las Vegas, and my friend and I were rushing to do what's called a big wall climb, which is
Hmm.
basically, it was like a 700-foot route. And when you climb on very big walls, your rope's only so long. So the people who create these routes, basically you have to do it in sections. Okay, so one person climbs up, then the next person climbs to them, the next person
Hmm.
climbs, and you just kind of follow each other all the way.
Yeah.
And on this particular route, you can't come down the same way you went up because it kind of goes off on an angle. So you
Hmm.
have to come down a different side. And that's really important because to go up this route, you can use a small length rope. But
Hmm.
to come down the route, you can use the same size rope, but you have to come down on the other side. If you attempt to come down on the side you came up, your rope can be too short to get down.
Okay.
So we were about 500 or 400 to 500 feet up. We got hit by a freak storm in the desert. We were already in the shade. We had no rain protection. We were not prepped for this storm at all. And Red Rock in Las Vegas is extremely brittle when wet. And we had to get off the route. We had to bail, but our rope wasn't long enough to get down to the next section. So she went down first, and then I had to go down and come off the rope about 300 to 400 feet up and do a small, about 15 to 20-foot section without any rope on. And
Mm.
thankfully, it was easy climbing. It was extremely wet. The thing that we didn't know about this situation is
Mm.
this route turns into a drainage point when it starts to rain. And in the desert, when it rains, it
Ooh.
starts to flood. So we were in a waterfall of like freezing cold rain in the desert, and we were starting to get hypothermic really quick. So that's kind of the key part of this whole thing, is that we were just
Wow.
shivering and we had to get out of this one section. And it was terrifying. I mean, I felt really safe the whole time in terms of what I felt as safe as I think we could have been, but it was one of those situations where when it happened, we both looked at each other and we're like, okay, we either have to call and get helicoptered off this cliff, but they're not going to be here for a while. And if we wait too long, we're gonna get hypothermic. We're literally in this rain, this waterfall of cold water, and our hands were going numb already. And we just had to work through that problem. And we knew once we got through this section, it would be fine, but that section was going to be really dicey. And it it was one of the scariest moments of my life, because I like to climb with a rope on. So being 300 feet off the ground without a rope, in a wet crack, trying to climb down 10 or 15 feet. In hindsight, it wasn't that far, but in the moment, you're like,
Mm.
I gotta just dial this in. So that was probably the scariest moment of my outdoor experience. But
And this was not your first near-death experience, was it?
no, my first one was I think in high school, where I was taking pictures on my kayak,
Hmm.
and I didn't realize how fast the current was pushing me. And anyways, I got thrown up against this ledge, which was fine. I mean, I kind of knew there was a danger of this ledge kind of flipping me,
Hmm.
but I didn't really care. I was like, whatever, I'll just get back on my kayak. It won't be a problem. But I didn't realize, and I didn't appreciate how strong currents were, because I got thrown under the ledge and there was like a rock there, and I got wedged in the rock, and the weight of the water was kind of pinning me against the wall underwater. And
Oh.
I tried my initially you panic, but then I realized, oh, I just got to calm down, think a little bit. And once I thought about it, I realized, oh, I can just go this way and kind of slowly shimmy my way out of the current. And it was completely fine. But I can see how it could, if I would have just panicked and not really thought about it and tried to fight my way out, I think that would have been the end of me. But it's just one of those seconds where you need to take 5 seconds, assess the situation, and then do the best decision. And then it was easy. So that was the first moment I was like, oh wow, uh, that was kind of scary.
What makes you keep going back to these experiences?
Um, they're
Is it the
really
rush?
they're wait, yeah. It's not. No, I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I guess it's a rush in the sense of like exploring new things. But
Yeah.
it's funny because I think the easiest things in my life is where the dangers come from. So that kayaking trip was like a leisurely kayak. I have
Mm.
never once felt like I was going to die on a whitewater rapid course. That rock climb was one of the easier rock climbs in my life. We just weren't
Oh.
prepared for the route to turn into a waterfall. So there's these easier things in my life have actually led to dangerous situations. All of the most dangerous things I have done
Hmm.
have gone exactly according to plan. And to be fair, I usually am more meticulous when I plan them. So
That
yeah,
that could be the driving factor there.
it could
The
be.
the,
But I
the
definitely
pre-planning.
I don't chase adrenaline. I have a buddy in Puerto Rico who is a base jumper and a wingsuit flyer, and
What
I
does that
know.
mean?
Oh, so base jumper is basically it's not skydiving, but you're skydiving at much lower altitudes to the
Okay.
point where you're jumping off a bridge doing a backflip, and as soon as you complete that backflip you got to pull your parachute or you're going to hit the ground. So it's a very like high consequence sport, and then that's usually the
Wow.
catalyst to go to wingsuit flying or squirrel suiting, and that's where you're jumping off cliffs with a looks like you're a squirrel,
Yeah.
and you are a flying squirrel, not a normal squirrel, a flying squirrel, and you're kind of hovering down at very fast speeds, and one mistake and it's you die. Wingsuit flying. I remember he told me he looked at me and said, if your friends aren't dying, that means you are dying. That's how he described the sport, and I was like, what? That is the most wild quote I've ever heard. So I don't have any interest in that.
No, no, neither. I don't think I do either.
Look up wingsuit flying sometime. Go down a rabbit hole on YouTube.
I
It
might
will
need to.
terrify you.
Might need to do that. Stuff that nightmares are made of. How do you learn these new? So sure, there's the interest in doing all these, for lack of a better word, I would say extreme sports. These are extreme sports, right? So, um,
I think so, but I'm like I would say I don't dabble in anything that hasn't been done by a 5-year-old. You know,
oh,
like
okay,
everything I've done, there's a child somewhere in the world doing it like crazier than me. So that's like I
okay,
just use that as a litmus.
okay. So there's a threshold. Okay,
Yeah.
learning these different skills, training your mind how to react in all these different situations, extreme situations for the average person, not that 5-year-old who's out there doing just changing the world. But let's say that this is more than an average person would do. So in terms of how do you learn in terms of the skills, how do you learn in terms of training your mind? And then does this tie in with any of the philosophy classes that you've taken back in college?
Hmm. That's an interesting question. Yes, probably. There's
Okay,
probably a lot of crossovers in these worlds that I haven't even really explored in my own brain. I can say like the first thing, I mean, I don't have a perfect list, but just some of the things that come to my mind. When you try anything new, I think in general, you're always capable of more than you think. And that's true for me.
sure.
The amount of times I get myself in a situation, you're like, you've been in way worse, calm
Mm-hmm.
down, you'll be fine. You know, you have this instinctual reaction to panic, and you
Yeah.
really just got to find ease with the fact that your body's going to panic, and you don't try to reject the panic. Just let it take over. Give yourself a few seconds to just panic internally, and then kind of breathe and start to
Mm-hmm.
think through the problems that's going to happen. So that's one thing, is really just like figure out what's causing you that panic and then try to overcome it. And there's some times where I have bailed on a trip because I could not overcome a hurdle, and I think it was for the best because like this part of the plan doesn't make sense to me, so I'm not going to do it. So I guess that's one thing. The other thing is I maybe going back to the philosophy question is I like to intensely try to visualize the experience before I do it.
Oh,
Um,
okay. That's
and that
interesting.
is yeah, that I think that is huge. Like when I started to go night snorkeling, um which is, not going diving at night is a very common activity if you're a diver, but jumping into the ocean at night for the average person is terrifying.
Yeah.
And I was in that boat too when I did it my first time. But I tried to just like, what was my fear? And the first fear was sharks. Like, what happens when I see a shark? So I just like sat down and visualized what that would be like. What would it be like to be swimming through the ocean at night and then see this large creature swim in front of me? And it happened a few months later. And I can't say I was like in love with the experience, but it felt like it was the second time I was going through it, and I had a better control over my body, and I was able to just breathe through it. The panic was still there, but it was fine. And
Hmm.
I try to do that in most of my experiences. And in general, practice is just visualizing is just practice. So even if it's visualizing or if it's actually doing something, um, just keep doing it until you feel really comfortable and you understand each component, and then it'll make it much easier.
What changes in the night snorkeling as opposed to the day snorkeling?
There's so much. So first, like, just like the physics of it is like you lose a lot of light as soon as you hit 1 foot or deeper. Well, even before that, but
Yeah.
you lose a lot of red light very quickly. So
Mhm.
most of the times that's why you get like a lot of blues when you swim in the water. So if you snorkel at night and you have a flash and you have your dive light, um, you're exposing like a lot of natural colors that you'd never see during the day. So it's really cool.
Oh,
The
okay.
reef and animals kind of come to life. A lot of things come out at night that you'd never see during the day, just weird creatures and crustaceans and all this stuff that are like, whoa, I didn't know this was at my feet before. This is crazy.
Wow.
fish are kind of in this docile state where they're not sleeping, but they're almost aimlessly moving. Not all fish,
Mm.
but some. So you'll
Yeah,
be able to get way more up close and personal at night, which is kind of cool. So there's just a different reaction. And then I like to go lobster. I like to find lobster at night, so those are easier to find at night too. But it's just a different experience.
but just hunting for dinner.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Lobster is like my favorite food, but I'm too cheap to buy
Nice, nice.
it.
What what uh what advice would you have for someone who is thinking of, charting out their life in terms of like an unbeaten path? Either be it in terms of setting up a new business or just navigating their professional career. Like what pointers or what major lessons would you want to share?
It's one that I'm grappling with every day,
Yeah.
and I'm getting better as I get older. And but I don't know if it's a Bill Gates quote. I don't know who if he took it from someone, but it's most people overestimate what they can do in a day and
Hmm.
underestimate what they can do in 10 years. I think it's pretty common at this point,
Yeah.
and I think you can rearrange those time frames any way that you want. I like to just think of it as I probably am going to overestimate what I can do today, and I'm going to underestimate where I could be a year from now.
It's so true.
So that's like the overlying philosophy that I'm grappling through right now because I want to do so many things and I know there's a finite timeline for a lot of them.
Hmm.
So I'm just trying to like, okay, most people would focus on one or two things, but I want to focus on five. Are they right, or do I just have to fix my tool set? And I'm gonna be a little contrarian and try to focus on five things. And just what I've been trying to do is, and I struggle with this, but I tried to just figure out, okay, what small thing can I do every day to just slowly incrementally improve on this?
Yeah.
And then what's amazing is that if you do it right, I'm already starting to experience this. You start to feel the compounding effects of the work, and you
Mm-hmm.
start to realize like, whoa, I wanted to do this business and I had no contacts, and now a year later or 3 months later, I have 20.
Mm.
And every month I try to learn a new skill, and now I'm starting to feel like an expert. So
Yeah.
it's a different approach, but that mindset has really helped me be able to balance a lot of different things.
Yeah. That's solid advice right there. Um, Justin, this has been a lovely conversation. Any parting thoughts, comments?
Well, do we have time? I can tell you a little bit about this random research project that
Let's
I
do that.
went
Let's do
down.
that.
Yeah, so this is who knows where this is going to go. It could go nowhere, but I've always had this side fascination with extraterrestrial research. I
Hmm.
just there's a center. It's called SETI, and they do really cool things. They've tried to send messages out into the universe, and
Hmm.
a lot of it's publicity stunts, but it's very interesting work on how could you communicate with another alien race if they found something that we sent out into orbit. So it's been a cool philosophy. And randomly during one of these sort of meditative sessions that I was
Hmm.
talking to you about,
Hmm.
I had this idea of how do humans map the universe, and they map it usually by stars,
Hmm.
and they're stars we know are so bright, we know a lot about them, they're not easy to study, but they're they produce the very thing that we
Sure.
need to see. So I was thinking like how could you use the sun how could you use the sun as sort of a beacon to communicate with other races, and I was thinking more of like a signaling mirror. Anyways, so I started to do some research on this and found out that the way that I was thinking of doing it in theory was a little bit different than a lot of other people. So I emailed one of the researchers and asked them, kind of made my proposal and said, hey, is this interesting? Is this how it would, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
And he gave me some good feedback. He also he ripped apart parts. He gave me the thumbs up on others,
Yeah.
and he mentioned some new areas of science that I had not even thought of. So one of my little side hobby things that I'm going to slowly kind of just taking the philosophy that I talked about earlier,
Uh-huh.
I'm just going to keep talking with him and keep engaging with this sort of community of people that is trying to figure out if you could use our sun, or if you could use tools we have today, how would you communicate with potential other aliens in the universe? Um, and I think that's a really cool research project. And I don't know what my role could ever be in that, either from the science or from the operation side, but
Yeah.
it's so much fun
Do,
um,
do you
thinking of
believe
this.
in, or not believe is a strong word, but do you believe in the possibility of an existence of parallel universes?
Um, I don't know if I don't know enough about them. I kind of want them to be true, but I don't know if I believe them. But I want to find either I want to find more. I want to learn more about it. Is really
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the short answer. Every time I've tried to dive into that, like read Lawrence Krauss's work when I was in college when I was doing physics, and I always struggle to understand those concepts. But I hope they exist. Do you believe in them?
On a conceptual level, I believe in the possibility of such a thing existing. Um, there's no proof for or against the argument. So I'm kind of like, I want to learn more. It's definitely interesting. It's definitely out there. Um, but why not? So
That
it's
that I'm with you on that. The parallel universes one is like it's this
or
this is why it gives me so
multiverse.
much
They're
peace.
they're
What's that?
different. Or multiverse. They're different, but kind of along
What's
the
the difference
similar.
between a multiverse and a parallel universe? Well, I guess a parallel universe. Yeah, give me your definition.
So my and this is just a very rudimentary understanding, is that parallel is that similar versions of us exist in the same time continuum but in different spaces. And multiverse could be time and space could be bended.
Oh, I see. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, but who knows?
Yeah, these topics are where I
I'm
realize that I've hit like the limits of my
yeah,
but this is what's so fun about this area is that you can truly let your imagination run wild and
yeah,
you can kind of as long I don't believe a lot of my delusions when it comes to this, but you can kind of just slip into this mindset where you can go, there is no boundary here. You can just
yeah,
think of wild concepts and having these little side hobbies, I think also helps with that. So I love
yeah,
it. I hope in some weird way I can contribute to that world, even if it's just one thought, some money for funding one of these scientists, or just giving someone else the catalyst to think of something or a new way of trying their own research.
yeah.
I've really loved it.
Let's do this. Let's go back, do some more research, and have our podcast number 3.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds great. Well, thanks so much. This was great. This was a wonderful time.
Likewise, as always. Thanks, Justin. I'll see you.
Yeah, thank you.